It is a historical question. Whether the resurrection of Jesus took place or not is a historical question, and so the question has to be decided on the level of historical argument, and not the meaning of resurrection. The meaning is the Christian idea, but whether or not it took place is anybody's option to look and see. And so, why do we look at that? If we remain a believer or a skeptic, then we won't bother so much because we can throw it out. But if you are going to be an inquirer, then to face up to a claim in which a man has said he has died and has risen again, it's either the greatest miracle that he is trying to talk about, or it is the greatest delusion and hoax in history. Are you with me? There is nothing in between when a person makes this kind of a claim, that he rose up from the dead. Topics of this nature are huge. They have many, many ramifications. And when anybody makes a claim, naturally questions arise. It is either the greatest miracle that is being claimed, or it is the greatest delusion and the worst hoax in history. Now, when I looked at that, I said, oh, so how do I decide whether it's a miracle or a hoax? 2,000 years later, would there be enough of material for me to make some kind of an inquiry? That's when I read Wilbur Smith's statement, and it says this: let it be simply said that we know more about the details of the hours immediately before the actual death of Jesus than we know about the death of any other one man in all the ancient world. He was a peasant, carpenter turned itinerant preacher. He was not a military general or an emperor or a king, and yet we know more about this man's death than of any other one man in all the ancient world. We know more about the burial of the Lord Jesus than we know of the burial of any single character in all of ancient history. Wow, I felt pretty good about that. Then I said, I can't possibly look at that record and try to see if there's some factors and some details that either contradict and show it all to be a hoax, or something that might be sort of consistent. Aristotle's dictum: when you look at a piece of literature which was written when you were not alive, then it's best to give the benefit of the doubt to the document itself and not arrogate it to yourself, because you were not there. You don't start off by saying he's a liar. That was not an inquirer's mind. An inquirer's mind is to make an honest inquiry. We don't start by saying it's false. Similarly, you must listen to the claims of the document under analysis and not assume fraud or error unless the author disqualifies himself by contradictions or known factual inaccuracies. So that is the basis by which we will do it. We will start off by saying, okay, they told us. We are wondering whether it stands scrutiny or not. We don't start by saying, oh yeah, it's true because somebody else said it's true. Nor do we say it's completely false because they were his friends who wrote it. That is not acceptable to an inquirer. If the story is said to be unbelievable, which it is, to an inquirer, to an honest inquirer, when you start out looking at this claim that a man rose from the dead, you must acknowledge, at least I did to myself, this is an unbelievable story. Why? Because it strains my sense of reasoning. What could the correct story be? So we're going to correct the story if it is wrong. But if we make a correction, it should fit in with the rest of the story. It should not strain my sense of reasoning. Otherwise, all we've done is jump from the frying pan into the fire. So don't tell me another explanation that is equally ridiculous. This is ridiculous enough to tell me that a man rose up from the dead. And I'm struggling with that. So the alternatives proposed. Number one, he did not die, he only fainted. This is called the swoon theory. He swooned, fainted, didn't really die. When he brought down from the cross and put him into the grave, in the cool atmosphere of the tomb, he was revived. Or, B, number two, he did not rise. He died, did not rise. The body was stolen by the disciples. And then they claimed that he was alive. So those are basically the two alternatives proposed. So let's look at those. Look at the record, look at these alternatives, and see if it does stand any scrutiny. He did not die. There are 4 ways of looking at this, maybe 5. Pilate marveled that he was dead. You know why that's stated? Because a person went and said, I want that body not to be left on the cross, I want to give it an honorable burial. And when he said that, Pilate said, is he dead already? This was within 8 hours. Do you know how long it takes for a person who's crucified to die? How do they die anyway? They usually die of suffocation. That is how a person who is crucified dies. And the average length of hanging on the cross, slowly dying of suffocation, is 3 days. Some have been known in history to have stayed there for 1 whole week and up to 10 days, dangling there, slowly suffocating to death. So when he died in 8 hours, and the people are asking for his body, Pilate said, wait a minute. How can I give you that body? Because I have sentenced him to death. And I can't give you an alive body. It will be a shame to Rome. Rome can't put an ordinary Jewish peasant to death. No. So, summoning the centurion, the person who was at the execution site, he asked him if he had been dead for some time. Significant words. Mark, the writer, didn't know that 2,000 years later I would be asking that same question. Did he really die? And yet he has written very significantly that Pilate would not give the body until he found out from the centurion. So when he found out from the centurion, then he granted the body. So how did the centurion know that the body was dead? When they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, meaning lifeless or still, they did not break his legs, but one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear. This is how the centurion was willing to take the body down. He also knew 8 hours is too short. He'd been to executions before, most probably. They usually hang there for 3 days. And here Pilate wants the body down, and it should be a dead body. And when they come, the other thieves who are crucified are still writhing and struggling and screaming and shouting, and this person is completely still. Appears to be dead, but how should he bring him down? What if he's still alive? And that's when he called for a soldier and said, bring your spear. Deal with him, then we'll bring him down. And these soldiers were the best trained soldiers in the world at that time. They were trained to fight against another soldier who was equally agile and strong and trained like he was, so that he could use his spear against that other soldier and kill him. That was the intent of a soldier. How difficult would it be for a soldier then to use his spear on a body that was still? Easy, 1 thrust. And scholars tell us that if he did not die of crucifixion, he would have died of that 1 thrust, because that is what it was meant to do. The centurion was not going to bring the body down until he was dead. That's what he did. And John, the writer, says, this soldier pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. Now, I'm a physician, so I do a little bit of looking into physiology. That was interesting. Blood and water. The blood contains cells which make the blood colored red. The fluid in which it moves is not colored, it is clear. It's called serum. And the only way you can have both is if the blood has remained still for some time. And then the cells will gradually settle down and leave the top part clear, serum. The doctors do order sometimes a test known as erythrocyte sedimentation rate. I've ordered it. And the way you order it, I want a 1 hour sedimentation rate or a 2 hour sedimentation rate, because it requires the blood to be still and kept in that tube for 1 hour or 2 hours, and then the cells settle out, and the bottom part will remain red, and the top part will be clear. It's called serum. You recognize the words "for some time"? Pilate asked the centurion, was he dead for some time? Then you bring the body down. And when this spear went in there, 2 streams came out. One was clear, today we will call it serum, and the other part was red, the cellular part of the blood. The spear probably would have thrust at the junction and brought those 2 streams out. John didn't know, he was not a doctor, he just wrote water and blood, but today we can recognize that it's possible that the blood had stopped flowing. Flowing blood will never separate out into these 2 parts. It has to be still, and it has to be still for some time. Oh, the other one is the possibility of escape. So we are saying he was put in there in a fainted condition, didn't really die, but he got up and went out of the tomb. Now really, if you're an inquirer, you will have to ask, how did he do it? In the darkness of the tomb, he would have had to identify the exact place where the door was, and this stone that was put against the tomb was sealed from the outside. So he would have had to somehow break the seal from the inside, that which was on the outside. First of all, he would have had to get up. A person who is put into a tomb is wrapped up with streams of cloth. And they're wrapped pretty close this way, and if you look at the pictures, that's how it is. I cannot find a reasonable explanation of how a person could have gotten out of that, number one. Number two, he was crucified. That means his hands and his feet were pierced. After 24 hours, the swelling and the pain is the worst of any wound. So we are saying at the worst time of those wounds, swelling, painful, his back lacerated, his side pierced, the nails going through his palms and his feet, he got up and found the exact place where the seal was, broke it, and rolled away the stone, which is called golel. Golel in Greek signifies a big stone which requires multiple people to move, and then somehow hobbled off. Nobody chased him at all, to some place unknown to either Jew or Roman till today. Does it sound reasonable? Not to me. The fifth point there is, who all thought he was dead? Finally, when the body was given, Pilate thought he was dead, the Roman centurion thought he was dead, and the friends of Jesus thought he was dead. Why do I know that? Because they brought embalming stuff. Embalming stuff will get into the tissues and keep it preserved. And the process of keeping it preserved is in death. If you use embalming stuff to a person who is alive, you will kill him. So if the friends of Jesus used embalming stuff on him, then even the friends of Jesus thought he was dead. There was no chance of resuscitation or bringing him back. So if the enemies and the friends of Jesus thought he was dead, I today, 2,000 years later, have no reason to think that he was alive. So for all these reasons, I think the most reasonable conclusion is that he was dead when he was brought down from the cross.